Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Raymond Yeung. Here are tonight's top stories. New COVID cases in Hong Kong surged to over 55,000. Carrie Lam says there won't be a full-blown lockdown, but people's movement may be limited. And Ukraine reels under the heaviest day of fighting since Russia invaded a week ago. Hong Kong has added another 55,000 COVID infections as the death toll in the fifth wave reached nearly 1,000. With the daily caseload rising sharply, the authorities conceded that they are unable to isolate everybody. The longer you're stranded at home, the less likely you will be transferred to an isolation facility. That was the message from the Center for Health Protection, which reviewed the selection criteria on admitting COVID patients to quarantine centers. Instead of first come, first served, the newly infected will get priority because of a higher viral load they are assumed to have, hence the greater transmission risk. Patients living in cramped households, such as subdivided units, will also be evacuated sooner. But authorities admitted it has no knowledge on how many infected people there really are in the community, as a notification platform for patients who test positive through rapid kits is still in the works.
We foresee that there will be a lot of cases, maybe up to thousands of cases reported every day because rapid antigen test is commonly used in the community.
This came as Hong Kong registered another daily record of 55,353 infections. Authorities insisted the number was within expectation.
What we observed that right now is that there is a doubling of the number of cases every 2 to 3 days. And so it is very important for people to get tested so that they know they are infected and have isolated themselves at home to prevent further transmissions in the community.
There were another 117 deaths, pushing the tally since the fifth wave began to 967. Cold storage containers are now being installed at the city's public hospitals as temporary morgues for around 500 bodies. The drastic solution followed reports that bodies were stranded at emergency rooms. Hospital Authority Chief Manager Larry Lee pledged to follow existing hygiene guidelines and that the bodies will be handled with respect. Chief Executive Carrie Lam says there will not be a full-scale lockdown during the citywide COVID tests, but there will be restrictions on movement. Macy Mock reports.
The uncertainty over arrangements for the mass testing program has triggered panic, with people flocking to stores to stock up on supplies in case of a full-scale lockdown. This prompted Chief Executive Carrie Lam to try and assure Hong Kongers.
有啲地方咧，一個全城嘅禁足或者係封城咧，就係不出不入添。咁啊，香港一定唔會做呢啲嘢㗎。
Everyone knows that there are places that have a citywide lockdown where people do not leave or enter places, she said. This will not be done in Hong Kong. But people will be restricted to a certain degree from going out in order to reduce pedestrian flow when the tests set for this month take place. Lam added that the city's actual circumstances and people's needs will be taken into account. Her clarification came 2 days after Health Secretary Sophia Chan said a lockdown had not been ruled out. Lam said it is hard to predict how many people may have to be quarantined after the citywide test. She noted that there have been about 200,000 cases since the fifth wave began, which make it hard for isolation facilities to cope. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
The United States has placed Hong Kong on its highest travel warning alert because of the city's COVID restrictions. The State Department moved the SAR up one level to 4, advising its citizens not to visit Hong Kong. According to the U.S., there's a risk of parents and children being separated because of COVID. The department said in some cases, infected children were kept in isolation until they met hospital conditions for discharge. It also warned that Hong Kong and Beijing's zero-tolerance approach restricted travel and access to public services. On to the invasion of Ukraine. Heavy fighting is raging in the country's second biggest city, Kharkiv, where Russian paratroopers have landed. The invaders also stepped up the shelling of other major cities, killing a number of civilians, including children. Yeung reports.
It was the most brutal day since Russia started the war against Ukraine a week ago. Moscow upped the ante with assaults across the country. In the capital, Kyiv, the targets included a TV tower. At least 5 people were killed, and some channels were forced to go off air. Ash and smoke drifted into nearby residential areas. Russian President Vladimir Putin said the invasion was to denazify Ukraine, but there was a missile attack near Babyn Yar, a major Holocaust memorial in Kyiv. Heavy shelling continued in the nation's second largest city, Kharkiv, where at least 21 people were killed and homes reduced to rubble. A government building in the city center was also hit. Most civilians responded to a call to arms by the government. At a train station in Poland, some Ukrainians were seen returning home to join the defense.
Well, actually, it's our country, and we love it, and we need to be there work as volunteers, for example, to help the people who are trying to find some refugee.
Despite the defiant spirit, Ukraine is aware that its military is much smaller than Russia's. President Volodymyr Zelensky appealed for help from the United States, saying Ukraine alone can't stand against Russia. He also claimed that 6,000 Russians were killed so far and told Putin to stop the bombardment if he wants negotiations to move forward. Yeung, HKIBC.
In Washington, President Joe Biden began his first State of the Union address by warning his Russian counterpart that he will pay a price for invading Ukraine and taking further action against Moscow.
6 days ago, Russia's Vladimir Putin sought to shake the very foundations of the free world, thinking he could make it bend to his menacing ways. But he badly miscalculated. We're cutting off Russia's largest banks from the international financial system, preventing Russia's central bank from defending the Russian ruble, making Putin's $630 billion war fund worthless. We're choking Russia's access. We're choking Russia's access to technology that will sap its economic strength and weaken its military for years to come. I'm announcing that we will join our allies in closing off American airspace to all Russian flights, further isolating Russia and adding additional squeeze on their economy.
Ukraine's ambassador to Washington, Oksana Makarova, applauded Biden's statement. She was the guest of honor at the address in which the president also warned Russian oligarchs who support Putin. Biden pledged that their assets abroad, including yachts and private jets, will be seized. More than 500,000 Ukrainians have fled the fighting in their country. Foreign students have also left, and many complained of mistreatment at the border.
We were waiting for so long, and there were Africans also, there were Indians also, and Ukrainians were let inside. So that sort of created an agitation among us because we were not entering and we were waiting for one day. And so we were thinking why they are given preference more than us. So we got kind of agitated and started pushing, and there was a chaos over there, basically.
Indian nationals who reached Romania have been given temporary shelter at the refugee center in the capital, Bucharest. The European Union, meanwhile, is preparing to accept up to 5 million Ukrainians. This triggered further cries of discrimination, as some countries had earlier turned away Middle Eastern and Africans who were also fleeing wars in their homelands. As the conflict between Russia and Ukraine escalates, the United States has tried to give Taiwan some sort of reassurances through a delegation visiting the island.
I lead this delegation of private citizens to voice our support for the continued and growing strength of the vital partnership between the United States and Taiwan. We come to Taiwan at a very difficult and critical moment in world history. As President Biden has said, democracy is facing sustained and alarming challenges, most recently in Ukraine. Now more than ever, democracy needs champions.
Mullen is part of a group of former U.S. officials who arrived in Taiwan yesterday. Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen met them today and said the crisis in Ukraine shows cooperation and initiatives between democracies are critically decisive. The visit has been condemned by China. And coming up after the break, more supplies arrive from the mainland to help Hong Kong fight COVID.